Welcome to The Way Left. I'm your host, Brian Vitello, and today's episode is on Trump's cabinet, Grift, and Oligarchy, Machiavelli, and Quid pro quo. So we're going to dive right in. I'm going to dive into the backers and the cabinet, backers being people that funded or helped fund or helped push Trump's agenda in the first and second terms. We're into the second term, and the cabinet and what their roles, what their statements, what their actions have been over the course of the first and second terms. We're going to start with Stephen Miller. He was a part of the first Trump term, and now he's part of the second Trump term. If I were to define right of center, I would say it goes conservatives, then it goes MAGA, then it goes Stephen Miller. That's how far right I would consider him. I consider him xenophobic. He's definitely white right. He says statements like it is a vast domestic terror movement. That's all of the left political organizations. So that would include the Democratic National Committee. That would include anybody on the left, anybody left of center. And in fact, anybody left of MAGA, I think he would consider a terror network. It's his way is pushing and engaging the federal government to come after anybody that doesn't agree with him. Stephen Miller says America is for Americans and Americans only. Not sure what that means. Does that mean you have to be born in America? Could you be an immigrant and then become an American through citizenship, green card? I would say the answer is Americans born in America that support a far-right authoritarian Christian democracy. Next guy, Kash Patel, FBI director, former right-wing conspiracy theorist, podcaster, and defense lawyer, who's made an enemies list, who said he wanted to see the Epstein files, and he wanted them out, him and Dan Bongino, another far-right-wing conspiracy theorist who is his assistant on the FBI, had no experience in Federal Bureau of Investigations, and now he leads the FBI. And he has an enemies list. He was asked if he would excuse himself from any prosecution so that it would be an unbiased innocent before being proven guilty. He said no. Very biased. His enemy list, you can see on here, it includes mostly Democrats, Joe Biden's, that Kamala Harris, Merrick Garland, the former attorney general. He has a few former Trump advisors like John Bolton, who's already invaded his house. We'll see if that was rightfully done based on warrants. General Miley, former chief of staff, going after anybody that kind of said anything or did anything. This is his enemies list, and this is our head of the FBI. He's definitely an advocate of the deep state, saying there's a deep state. So let's be clear, what is a deep state? A deep state is what they're saying is there's bureaucrats within the federal government that only support one side or the other. And that may be true. There may be some nefarious people. We'd want to root them out. We do need some career bureaucrats because we need the system sustain from transition from administration to administration. To state that it's a deep state alliance to basically control the country, and we'll talk about this later, I think is far-fetched. And of course, now that they're getting in and they're rooting out the deep state, now they're going to put their own deep state involved. So which one's the deep state? Both. So anyhow, that's Kash Patel. Next up, we got Pam Bondi, Department of Justice, Attorney General, supposed to be kind of independent of people like Stephen Miller or Kash Patel or Donald Trump. There's no independence here. She didn't even try to act like she's being independent. Trump sends her Truth Social post to prosecute people. She has said that the Epstein list was sitting on her desk and then suddenly it vanished. Lies, lies, lies. I don't really care about the Epstein list. I do care about the women that were abused, and I would like to see someone prosecuted besides Jeffrey Epstein. I don't know that Trump did anything bad. Well, I'm sure he did bad things, but was he a pedophile? I don't know, and I don't care. But this just speaks to what they're saying. I have a list, and now it's gone. Kash Patel wants it released, and now there's nothing in there. We're going to release the video, but we're missing a minute, but everything's fine. No conspiracy there. She also said that there's free speech, and then there's hate speech. No, there's not. And, well, the First Amendment protects free speech. Now, libel, if you say things that are untrue about a person, like Alex Jones did with Crisis Actors and Sandy Hook, he was sued. That wasn't his opinion. He was spewing false statements about things and people and influencing that. That's libel. If you yell fire in a movie theater, that is against the law. So there are some rules, but in general, like Charlie Kirk would say, and I don't agree with most of anything that came out of his mouth, free speech, absolute free speech. Pam Bondi's not for that. Now, she got pushed back and took that back and acted like she didn't say it. That's kind of her MO. We get to Peter Thiel. Peter Thiel is a billionaire, an intelligent technology investor, was partners with Elon Musk and PayPal. And he now all of a sudden thinks he's a politician. He also talks about the Antichrist. One of his famous quotes is, "I no longer believe that freedom and democracy are compatible." So freedom and democracy. So if we have democracy, we don't have freedom. And if we have freedom, we don't have democracy. He needs to define what that means, because the way the people he follows and the people he supports, people like Elon Musk, people like JD Vance, they don't support freedom, and they don't support democracy. They support authoritarianism and illiberalism. He's a big money backer of Trump, and he also was a big money backer of JD Vance when he was a senator or a representative out of Ohio before he became vice president. And then we'll get to JD Vance, couch potato. This guy's interesting. You know, he wrote Hillbilly Elegy, became really famous writing about all the doldrums that went on with drug addiction and family in Ohio. And before he was even up for vice president, he called Trump is America's Hitler. He also said, "I'm a never Trump fan, never Trump guy." The question is, now that he's vice president, because everybody's a hypocrite, everybody does something hypocritical. This is a pretty far reach. And the point is, maybe what he was saying, it was a compliment. Trump is America's Hitler. And based on some of the things he said, some of the people he meets with, right-wing populists, right-wing fascists, right-wing organization, neo-Nazi groups, xenophobic, complete racist groups like Nigel Farage for the far right in Britain, who helped get Brexit done to create isolationist and protectionist policies. That sounds solid to what we're doing now. He's also a supporter of AfD in Germany, which is a far right populist group and called neo-Nazi, denies that all SS people were guilty of doing anything. They couldn't be assumed guilty by association, that I'm sure some of them were fine when they were in the SS rounding up Jews. So that's JD Vance. Marco Rubio. This guy has sold his soul. He's attached to Adelson, big billionaire out of Vegas. He's now the Secretary of State and I think the head of national intelligence. Rubio and intelligence combined doesn't make sense. That being said, when he ran against Donald Trump in 2016, he said to Jake Tapper on CNN, "For years to come, there are many people on the right, in the media and voters at large, that are going to be having to explain and justify how they fell into this trap of supporting Donald Trump." Huh. So how about you, Marco? Sold your soul, brother. That's our Secretary of State. Steve Bannon was the chief of staff in the first presidency, first term. He was pushed out after like 6 months because it's a whack job. His famous quote here, and he has a lot of famous quotes. He is far-right MAGA. He made comments about Europe that's too dark because not enough white people, too many immigrants. He is for, so here's his quote. "I'm a Leninist. Lenin wanted to destroy the state, and that's my goal too. I want to bring everything crashing down and destroy all of today's establishment." He wants to tear it all down, and he wants to and he wants to boost an authoritarian right, an authoritarian Christian democratic nationalist. There's nothing democratic about that. That's this guy. This guy's a scary fuck, and an ugly fuck. Pete Hegseth, 3 times divorced, drunk, Fox News contributor who now manages 3 million people in the Secretary of War, which has been changed from the Secretary of Defense because Trump's not a warmonger, but he wants his department to be called the Secretary of War. The War Department makes a lot of sense there, too. Nothing that comes out of that orange-ass clown's mouth makes much sense. Pete Hegseth said his white supremacist tattoos are just anti-Christian bigotry, because this guy's a big Christian. I mean, he's really followed the Christian faith. He also follows a pastor that said women should not vote, and Pete Hegseth has also gone about changing the names of Army military bases back to Confederate soldiers' names, saying they're actually World War I or World War II veterans. He's just finding coincidences. The Republicans and Democrats said this is a thinly veiled attempt to preserve Confederate history. It's not a thinly veiled. It's an absolute attempt and actually policy to preserve Confederate history. White supremacy. Men vote, women don't. There's nothing else you can say about it. That's our head of the Secretary of War. Kevin Roberts, he's a backer. He's the Project 2025 president that put together their Christian democracy and to get rid of liberalism and illiberal society, basically a Christian nationalist agenda. He's a big supporter. Of course, nobody knew who Project 2025, JD Vance, none of those guys acted like they knew. They knew, they lied. They're pushing that agenda. He comes out and says Viktor Orban, he's a big fan of Viktor Orban and his authoritarian government. In Europe, modern Hungary is not just a model for conservative statecraft, but the model. That's Kevin Roberts. We can see the theme here. Elon Musk, got some pictures of him doing a Nazi salute. He said it was a Russian salute, or a Roman salute. Here he is with his black guy after he got his ass kicked by Scott Bessent. He is a big AfD supporter, was online, did a whole video with them, the AfD being the far-right populist group out of Germany that's been called a neo-Nazi group. There's a nationalist party that didn't really condemn the SS. And then, of course, his famous quote recently after Charlie Kirk assassination, which again, I don't support violence. Hate, fear gets to violence, and that begets violence. And guess what? We have a lot of guns. He said the left is the party of murder. So you want to talk about hate speech? I guess if I put out the right is the party of murder after the state senators in Minnesota were killed by a MAGA supporter, I would have been hate speech. But in his case, it's just the left is the party of murder, according to and following the doctrine of Stephen Miller. RFK Jr., this guy, former heroin addict, environmental lawyer, adulterer, confessed adulterer, said heroin helped him, vaccine skeptic. He is not a scientist. He's a pseudoscientist. He admits to not being a scientist, and now he's the head of Health and Human Services and the CDC. He says Tylenol causes autism, that vaccines cause autism. This guy's proven he's saying all sorts of crazy shit. We all need to investigate stuff, but let's look what happens when you do this. Oh, we've got a measles outbreak. So one of the basic vaccines that most people in America and the world get is called an MMR vaccine for measles, measles, and rubella. He's not a big fan of that vaccine. And of course, now we have the largest outbreak since 2000. It is not a coincidence. It is ironic. It makes sense. It's right in line. We're going to get fluoride out of the water. He does have some good ideas about the environment. Problem is he wasn't put head of the EPA because Donald Trump is going to get rid of the EPA because climate change is a hoax, of course. Tulsi Gabbard, I'm not going to say much about her. She's supposed to be the head of intelligence. She used to be a Democrat. She flip-flopped. She got orange all over her and joined MAGA. There's nothing intelligent about this lady. And I'm not knocking her because she's late. I'm knocking her because she's slime. She's bought in. Tucker Carlson. Woo! Now this guy's a lot like J.D. Vance. Trump's awful. I hate him. He said he passionately hated him. Couldn't wait for him to get out after the 2020 election. And then, of course, the insurrection that was supported and incited, which would actually be against free speech by Donald Trump, to get the Proud Boys, who should be listed as a terrorist organization, comes right in, says, I'll be glad when he's out. Of course, Fox was sued for defamation because they were making up libel-type speech where they were accusing Dominion voting systems of doing something bad to question the authority of the voting. And of course, that was proven wrong. And Fox paid out $787 million and fired Tucker Carlson. And then Tucker Carlson went far right. Now he's a big fan of Putin. He loves the grocery stores in Russia, as he had on his podcast. He talks about, we're very, I'm sorry, it was after he said, Moscow's so much nicer than any city in my country. That's Tucker Carlson. Well, fucking move there. If there's one guy I want to move to Moscow, go ahead, Tucker. Tucker Carlson argues Russia is thriving under Putin despite war. I think we can just do like 3 researches and prove that's absolutely false. And then he says, well, I'm definitely more sympathetic to Putin than Zelensky for the following reason. I think it's fair to judge leaders and how they do for their country. They have one job: do a good job for your country, make it better. And of course, Russia is doing a better job, according to Tucker Carlson. It's fucking nuts. And this country invaded Ukraine, killing hundreds of thousands, if not millions, including Russians and Ukrainians, freaking kidnapping kids and indoctrinating back in Russia. This is the guy. This is the authoritarian. This is the Viktor Orban, Vladimir Putin model. This is the model that they want. Now, I'm not saying they want to be Putin, but they want the authoritarian model. Illiberalism. Liberalism is dead, as Viktor Orban says. Okay, that was fun. Pretty deep dive. So we moved into backers and cabinet. Now we're going to go into quid pro quo. We'll define that and see how that affects, what's happening with the Trump presidency. How are they running business? So let's define quid pro quo, because everybody assumes everybody speaks Latin, and we don't. So quid pro quo is a Latin phrase meaning something for something, or this is for that. It refers to an exchange where one thing is given or promised in return for something else. You can do that legally, a mutual exchange of goods, a neutral fair trade, but you can also go negative, unethical or illegal exchange. So let's look at some quid pro quo here. Qatar, a supporter of Hamas, pledged a $400 million jet to Trump. Now, Trump says it's for America, but after he's done with his presidency, he's going to get it exclusively because it's going to be to his library. So we have what's called an emolument clause, where anything over $400 you have to have approved by Congress. Congress did nothing about this cutter jet. They're just going to allow him to do it. That's called quid pro quo. That's not legal. And that's Congress's fault. They're not doing anything. Vietnam bypassing its own laws. So Vietnam has defied their own laws to fast track a $1.5 billion Trump golf resort amid tariffs threat. So we threaten them with tariffs. They give us something back. That is an illegal exchange. That is quid pro quo in a negative sense. Trump project began groundbreaking after just 3 months of planning process, said to usually take years. John Bowden, Washington, D.C. Then, of course, we have there's all sorts of stuff going on. We could go into the Bitcoin extravaganza, not the Bitcoin, but the Trump coin, and how people can donate money to that anonymously because it's through the blockchain. But here we are. The United Arab Emirates accessed the high-powered artificial intelligence chips just days after receiving a massive investment in Trump's cryptocurrency startup. So they donated $2 billion in the World Liberty Financial, the startup founded by members of the Trump family and the family of Trump Middle East envoy Steve Witkoff. So I think quid pro quo has been going on a long time. I think Hunter Biden probably did some bad shit. I'm sure some quid pro quo went on with Joe Biden. I'm sure it went on with Barack Obama, Bush. But this is 8 months in, billions and billions and billions and billions of dollars, and Congress ain't doing shit. The White House agreed to allow the UAE access to hundreds of thousands of the world's most advanced and scarce computer chips, despite national security concerns about these chips being shared with China. So we're going to share them with the UAE because they gave us a deal. We're not going to share them with China because they didn't give us a deal. Now, we do need some security measures. I'm not sure security has anything to do with Trump's passion. It's money for him first, secondarily for his people, cronyism, and then thirdly, maybe the Americans get something out of it. I think what we're doing is we're creating enemies around the world. Nationalism is a policy. Law firms. He went after law firms and said, I'm going to punish you with executive orders unless you give us free legal services. He said he wanted bending prominent law firms as well as they seek to cut deals with the administration to avoid being targeted by White House sanctions. So quid pro quo, I won't prosecute you if you give me money or you provide free legal services. So they gave free legal services. So a lot of these law firms now have had exits by major partners. They basically gave in. That's quid pro quo. If you want to prosecute them if they're doing something wrong. Quid pro quo, sending over free services for his defense or for his library or for anything like that, that's quid pro quo. That is not legal. Congress should investigate these. CBS and ABC paying the Trumps for defamation. Well, here's the deal. Just go to court. But remember, our new conservative Supreme Court has basically made the president more immune than he'd ever been. So he can prosecute others, but we can't go after him. Now, there is some good reasons for that, but when you're doing this route, when you're doing this authoritarian route, the quid pro quo, the negative quid pro quo way, Congress should be investigating you. But Congress ain't going to investigate Trump. Mike Johnson he has an altar to Trump at his house. He bathes himself in orange every day. Mike Johnson being the leader of the House. CBS and ABC paid up. And Jimmy Kimmel affair, actually, he's back on. So, yeah. And it seems like this bias, but it's all there. Noam Chomsky. So I'm not a big fan of heroes or idolatry. I'm a fan of influences and inspirations. And someone you'll hear me talk about on a lot of podcasts, and I have a lot of his books on my website under What Are You Reading? You should read anything by him. I'm not saying he's always right. But one of his quotes is, I'm not that smart. I just read a lot. He's notorious for reading 8 newspapers a day, back when newspapers were a thing. And of course, he's a smart guy. He's a linguist. He's a world-renowned linguist, the study of language, MIT. He stayed in kibbutzes in Israel. You can have disagreements. I'm not saying everything out of his mouth is something that I'm going to agree with, but this guy, read this. And what he's saying is, what I'm doing here is I'm not pulling stuff out of thin air. I have some opinions, but I'm going to pull it from the sources, from journalists. Journalists still exist. Pull it from the documented record. Look at Wikipedia. Know that some of it may not be all there, but there's information out there. Read some fucking books and do some digging, and that's how you get to the results. Okay, let's go to some more quid pro quo. So TikTok, as everybody knows, is a really popular Chinese app. I've never used it. Probably will at some point just for the fun of it, for the fuck of it, so I can share all my personal information with China, which they probably already have. So TikTok has an algorithm out of China. The China government is another authoritarian quasi-democracy, democratic quasi is saying a lot, but they control the algorithm so they can get that information readily from the owners of TikTok. Congress voted to ban it, and Supreme Court upheld it. Trump comes in and he extends it. Okay. He can't extend it. It's the law. So now he's breaking the law. Of course, nobody's going to do anything in Congress to say that that's wrong. So he broke the law. So when there's a law, there's a law, there's a law, there's a law, but not for Donald Trump. And what he's doing is he's basically doing a deal. So the government is acting like a communist country and saying, hey, we're going to get involved with deal making with the open, free capitalist market. And so what he's doing is he's bringing in his buddies, Larry Ellison, the richest man in the world, back and forth, richest man in the world, Oracle, and Andreessen Horowitz, an investment bank. Andreessen we'll talk about later and his support of oligarchies. And then they're going to put a Fed member on the TikTok board. Now, we've done this in the past. We had some on GMC during the car crisis. Then they went away. But we seem to be doing this across the board. We're going to do it with Intel, $10 billion. We're going to do it with TikTok, and we're going to allow TikTok. We don't know where the algorithm is going to be, and the algorithm would be the most important piece. It's supposed to be supported in the U.S. If it's not supported in the U.S., it's supposed to be illegal for TikTok to work here. Trump has defied the law, and he should be upheld to that. Of course, Congress won't do that. So this is the definition of cronyism. Cronyism is my buddy is going to get it. Not only is my buddy going to get it, but we're going to do this the illegal way because I'm already defying Congress. So we're going to do quid pro quo. We're going to get a little bit of a deal here with China, as Trump would say. So we quid pro quo follows right into this. And of course, it's socialism in a way, because what are we doing? We're sticking our members on the board. So that's a form of socialism, communism. Now, but Donald Trump's MAGA is going socialist on us with these TikTok board members and Intel board members and controlling the means of production. That's called communism. Kleptocracy. Kleptocracy leads to fascism/autocracy. And we have many books. I have many books on my website that you should read. Ann Applebaum and Timothy Snyder about the road to autocracy, the road to unfreedom, things of that nature. Kleptocracy is when the government and their cronies benefit illegally and unrightfully and undemocratically from these deals. This is not going out to bid, which if it's going to happen, first, it shouldn't have been extended. It should have been gone out to bid, get the algorithm in the United States. If China says they don't like it, TikTok goes away. I mean, China doesn't let Google and doesn't let, our search engines do what they want in their country, but we're going to allow TikTok to do whatever they want in our country. Is it tit for tat? Maybe a little bit of that, but at some point, I think we trust our government more than we trust China's government for the safety and security of the United States. Starting to question that with Trump, but I'm not going to go that far. Anyway, kleptocracy, clear and defined. Has kleptocracy been going on for years? Of course it has. But at the level that Trump's doing it, he is taking it to an autocratic realm. Okay, got one more here. Tom Homan, the guy who's out there chasing around brown people, incarcerating them without any habeas corpus or rights. That's the immigration enforcement jackass. This guy got caught with a bag of cash. But guess who closed the investigation? And this has been ongoing. The FBI. No wrongdoing. Now, whether there was criminal activity here or not, this is the ethics violation right away. This guy should be fired and reprimanded. We're just going to close the case. Nothing to see here. Just like the Epstein files. Oh, we've got the files. Oh, they're gone. We don't have. Oh, we got the video. Well, we don't have the. We're gonna release the files. We're not gonna release the files. Tom Homan accepted a bag of cash. So it's investigated at FBI. We're just gonna stop that investigation. And then there's nothing else to see here. Autocracy Inc., my brothers and sisters. Okay. So we've talked about backers. We've talked about the cabinet. We've talked about illegal quid pro quo, which has been going on for years in the government. And now we've taken it to the farthest level that we possibly can. And that's going to be the standard bearer. And this is 8 to 9 months in. This is illiberalism. This is autocracy. This is authoritarianism. Okay. And last thing we're going to go into is how this thought comes about. How these people like Peter Thiel, Mark Andreessen, who formed Netscape, who's now a big investor and is a big fan of certain topics that we're going to talk about. How Elon Musk got here. Who is this based on? So let's just go through kind of a influence diagram that I put together. And all these people have talked clearly about it. But let's talk about it. This isn't conspiracy. This is information. So if we look at, and there's obviously people in here that are missing, and there are people in here that may not have as much influence as other, but we're going to go through some steps here. Our road, let's just call it And there's a book called The Road to Autocracy. Let's just call it The Road to Project 2025's Christian nationalism vision, the illiberal society where the few control the many. So from Plato, who had forms of government, which I'll show you, to Machiavelli, who wrote The Prince, who talked about a centralized power of oligarchy and very limited voting rights and rights of the people as a form of government that works. Carl Schmitt, who was for authoritarianism, also a Nazi supporting authoritarianism, influences on people like Curtis Yarvin. Jesse Burnham, who ended up working with William F. Buckley as a conservative, wrote a book about Machiavellism, talking about that's the route to go, supporting the oligarchical model and saying that that's the model that we need to survive on Earth. Not democracy, not liberal democracy, but oligarchical autocracy. Oligarchical being a funny term for oligarchy. Curtis Yarvin, nutbag blogger, who's come up with basically the same type of things. We'll talk about what he did. These all have influence, especially these three have influence on Peter Thiel, Elon Musk, Mark Andreessen, and their philosophy about what government should be, how far right it should be, how populist it should be, and how authoritarian it should be. Again, Peter Thiel stating that he doesn't believe that democracy and freedom can work together. Therefore, he wants to go back to a Machiavellian model, which these two support. Kevin Roberts, the head of Project 2025, along with a contributor, Russell Vought, both love the Hungary model. They want to strip the government down. And then you have the Hungary model, which is illiberal Christian nationalist democracy, is what they call it. I would not call it democracy. J.D. Vance, who's followed Peter Thiel, who's a big fan of Curtis Yarvin. All these people have said this. It's all clear. And that leads into the bad model, the really bad model of Vladimir Putin, authoritarianism, absolutely no free elections. I mean, Russia is basically a gas station with nuclear weapons. But, even though Tucker Carlson says this is this great country and is doing really well, which is a load of shit, what do they create? What do you buy that's Russian? What have you bought in the last 30 years that's Russian other than vodka? Nothing. Now, countries might buy oil, gas, and vodka. You don't buy anything else. You don't buy cars, clothes, computers, technology. Again, a gas station with nuclear weapons. Vladimir Putin obviously has an influence on Viktor Orban, our friend, who says that liberalism is dead, liberalism being freedom of speech, freedom of thought. And then that leads to Donald Trump, who isn't an ideologue, but all these influences come right down to this guy. Okay, so we went from that model, and now I'm going to go over some of those names. And into the guy from the beginning, the oldest guy. You've probably heard of him. His name is Plato. And we're not going to do a deep dive on here. But Plato has forms of governments that he wrote in his Republic. We're talking about like 500 BC, long time ago. So his basic here is that he says that his 5 levels are, by what he said was quality, was aristocracy was first. Now remember, most people didn't know how to write or read. They lived day to day, and they lived about 30 years. So in his idea, we needed aristocracy because we needed aristocracy to be led by kings, the wise, virtuous, and educated rulers. They had wisdom. Well, because they were nepos, and everybody else didn't have access. Democracy, ruled by honorable or military, very much like an aristocracy. Same deal. You're an exclusive class. Society, again, is generally poor, very uneducated, and don't live long. So we need a rule. So there's no real democracy here. There's no real vote. This is this transition from generation to generation. Oligarchy is this fourth. Rule by the few, wealthy. Government led by the rich. Power is based on property and wealth. We'll get back to this with Curtis Yarvin. So anybody that has property and wealth can rule. Again, social division between rich and poor grows. The poor are largely excluded from political participation. That's great. Prioritizes wealth over virtue. Democracy is his fourth one. Ruled by many free citizens. Again, remember, not a lot of educated, so he didn't like this. It was vulnerable to chaos and manipulation, a step towards tyranny. It's a desire for freedom or license. All of those are true. We're always a step away from tyranny. We have tyranny right now going on in a democratic country. Tyranny by the Trump administration through quid pro quo. Tyranny through the Trump administration by going after freedom of speech. So I want to show this because the last one is tyranny, which would be the worst. That would be overthrowing the government. I wanted to show this because I don't want a history lesson. I want you to say that a lot of people will reference that Plato had it fourth and that oligarchy and aristocracy or monarchy was at the top of his list. Again, we're talking like 20 600 years ago. Okay. Then we move on to Machiavelli. So all of us have heard about him. Some of us haven't read about him. This guy was in the Renaissance, the Prince, where he lays out practical advice for rulers. His principles, governance, and rule are often summarized pragmatic, sometimes ruthless, and focused on maintaining power and stability. He argued that the main goal of a ruler is to maintain power and secure the state. Considerations are secondary to political, that rulers may need to act immorally if it ensures survival. So there's Machiavelli. Basically, what he argues for is for an oligarchy with a prince or a Manchurian candidate, if you will. Now, a Manchurian candidate would be someone that's really a false person, and then everybody else around him is the intelligent. Now, Jesse Burnham wrote a book about this, advocating for it. Mark Andreessen, Curtis Yarvin, J.D. Vance have talked about how great that would be. So who gets to decide who that is? And there's no vote for us, for the masses. Basically, we're back to an aristocracy, monarchy / dictatorship. They might call it an oligarchy, but it's dictatorship in some form, authoritarianism, fascism, if you will. Okay. And then lastly, I'm going to go into the current nutbag. And when you see the picture of him, I think it's pretty clear. This guy hasn't been laid since he was, maybe never. Maybe that's why he doesn't want women to vote, because that's what he says. Curtis Yarvin. So Curtis Yarvin's basically a blogger. I pulled some stuff from, some basic stuff from, and I've read books on him and Carl Schmitt. I've read Jesse Burnham's book you can find on Machiavellianism. I recommend it to read it so that you understand. I'm not saying to be an advocate of it. That is on my website under What Are You Reading? I'm going to put some out there on Yarvin. I have had some good analysis. I have some details below. There's Curtis Yarvin. If you're watching, yeah, that's your guy. So this guy's into what's called neo-reactionary thought. And what that means, he's followed by President Trump, Steve Bannon, J.D. Vance, Michael Anton. So neo-reactionary thought, or his term for this, is reject democracy and modern liberal governance in favor of hierarchy, authoritarianism, and centralized rule. Now, he started off by saying he wanted a monarchy, but he changed it to more of a corporate-style structure governed by a COO rather than elected politicians, what he calls neo-cameralism. So what he wants is authoritarianism. That's what he wants. He wants no liberal governance. Women's suffrage led to poor governance. This is a quote by Yarvin, implying women should not vote. Women are too sensitive to lead, need to be caregivers and babysitters. Women don't make rational decisions but emotional appeals. Diverse societies are inherently unstable. He wants homogeneous societies. What does that mean? Less browns and more whites. Women stay home. They don't vote. And this is what he says. He says democracies are unstable and authoritarianism isn't. And if the societies are so unstable, why don't we look at the culprits? Was it the women that caused the problems we have in this world? So it's all these bad, sensitive women that have caused all these problems worldwide. Funny, I don't think Hitler was a woman. That's weird. I think most of the slaves we imported were by white guys. I think the genocide of Native Americans probably was more of the white Christians. And I'm pretty sure the people that invaded Latin America and South America were guys. Stalin was a guy. Mao was a guy, killing millions of people. Where are all these terrible women? I mean, they've just decimated society. They've torn it down. And it was so great when those guys were running the world. He goes into human biodiversity, genetic differences for IQ, behavior, basically eugenics, deciphering. He wants people to have rights when they have property. This goes back to Plato. So it just creates a bigger chasm. Those are the only people that have any intelligence because they have a basic IQ and they have property rights. We don't want voting for all. Again, this guy is talked about by Peter Thiel, by J.D. Vance. Donald Trump probably says it. He probably doesn't know how to spell it. He's probably just heard it from somebody. I'm sure Stephen Miller's a big advocate of this. Rights only exist as property rights. Vast majority of people are customers who generate value for owners. Sounds like Jeff Bezos' model. Citizens do not vote or participate in policymaking. Democracies fail. Authoritarianism succeeds. Doesn't give a lot of examples. I mean, that's the basis. So why did I deep dive on all this? Because I wanted to deep dive on this. I've been deep diving on it for about 6 to 10 years. Where is this push for illiberalism coming from? Is it just coming from foreign sources? Is it just coming from one guy like Peter Thiel, who's now out preaching about the Antichrist? No, it's coming from a lot of people, and it's influencing a lot of people. And most of those people are now in our administration or backing our administration. When Donald Trump ran for president on the second term, he said, you have to vote for me because this is the last time you'll have to vote. Now what was said later, now he never said this, was that people said, well, it's the last time you can vote for him. But of course, he said he wants to change the amendment that says limits to 2 terms if he could get the votes. The point is, the road as defined by Ann Applebaum and Tim Snyder, when you're on the road to autocracy, it's a slow roll, and then things happen that you don't control. And the danger here for the Republicans and for Americans and Democrats is even if a Democrat comes in 2000, the left, win elections in 2026, there'll be a tendency to not let those controls and powers go. So the danger is we just go there and it doesn't matter who's leading us. So the question is, what do? We read, we get informed, we vote for people that don't believe in us. We push our senators or representatives. We teach our kids. We expose them to a lot of books, not just left-wing books or right-wing books. That's why I said you need to read Curtis Yarvin, Carl Schmitt. You need to read Jesse Burnham. You need to read quotes by J.D. Vance. You need to read shit on the left, too. You need to read Noam Chomsky. And I'm going to leave with a quote from a Megadeth song. Great song if you love metal. Military intelligence, two words combined. That can't make sense. And I thank you for watching The Way Left.